Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Scialla, co-founder and COO of Delos. It is an absolute pleasure for me to be here today with you all. I see a lot of thought leaders, and this is such an important topic, building the future of health. I want to extend a bit of gratitude to our friends at Noah Bear for the invitation, the work they're doing with the Healthy Life Alliance. It's thought leadership like that that continues to inspire progress and change. And so thank you, and I'm privileged to be here today. This is actually extra special for me because my mother's heritage is Dutch. She was born in the Netherlands in 1953 in a small town called Edam, not too far from here. So in many respects, it's nice to be home. Delos, as a company, operates at the intersection of real estate and the health and wellness industry. As we all know, real estate, near and dear to everybody in this room, is the largest asset class in the world. And health and wellness is arguably one of the most important, if not the most important industry. And factually, it's the fastest growing industry. And the prospects of combining those two disciplines is very exciting. And it actually speaks to the core of what Delos does as a company. Our mission is to improve the quality of lives and health of occupants of the built environment by focusing on the effect that buildings and structures have on the people that live, work, and play inside these structures. We began a journey about 5 years ago with an observation about the use of the term sustainability in real estate and how much progress had been made in the green building movement, environmental sustainability. All right, so over 15 years, if you think about what green building has done, it has touched nearly 20 billion square feet globally, inspired a lot of change in how buildings are in fact affecting the environment and how we can leave a lower carbon footprint. So we commend that effort. And what we noticed in that examination was there was a vacuum of thought as it related to the effect that buildings are having on the occupants of these buildings. So much progress, so much change, so much good focused on environmental sustainability and making change in our building practices towards the betterment of the environment. And we wanted to fill that void and address what we thought, vacuum in thought, towards the effect that buildings are having on people inside. And so I can remember a very early meeting that we had. We had gathered some leadership across many different disciplines. And one of the early days in selecting a team to examine how are buildings affecting people, not just the environment, we looked around the room and there were doctors, scientists, architects, and engineers all in the same room having dialogue about the built environment. It was interesting. For the first time, we had the medical community and the scientific community speaking to architects and doctors. And the question that was posed was pretty simple. If you could dream it up, what types of things would you put inside four walls and a roof to address human health and to introduce preventative medical intentions into the built environment? Obviously, a lot of things came out of this that were quite intuitive. Okay, so purified air, very easy one. Purified water, these things are not new ideas, okay? And thankfully, they've been practiced for decades. I don't think there's any argument that you can purify air that's better for the human body, that promotes long-term health, and that this can be done in a cost-effective and scalable way. And similarly, when you think about the disciplines of purification of water, we said, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's continue to expand into other categories. And we got into things like acoustics and how acoustic noises and ambient sound levels, depending on how high they are, affect the stress levels in the body. And realized that there are decades and decades of scientific research in each one of these disciplines. When you think about acoustic comfort, when you think about thermal comfort and the effects that has on the body, obviously clean air, clean water, things like sit-stand desks, okay, and ergonomics, okay. There's obviously a newer field of science, but really starting to penetrate the industry now. We got excited that there's a real body of work here developing, and we can leverage decades of research in a holistic manner and possibly put together a protocol to address building practices in the industry and hopefully globally. And so what really got us excited is when we crossed the field of light. The Prime Minister today, thankfully, made mention of light and the effects that light has on the human body. This is a very new field of science, okay? It was just about a decade ago that doctors discovered the circadian optic nerve and realized for the first time that our eyes are not just vehicles for seeing. They're also instruments to tell our body what time of day it is, okay? So when you think about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, before we built these boxes around ourselves, we're used to having a lot of energy, being awake when the sun was high in the sky in the afternoon, preparing for rest during sunset, and getting good, high-quality sleep overnight when it was completely dark. The lighting in this room, ladies and gentlemen, is going to have a profound impact on the way you sleep tonight, okay? Institutions like the American Medical Association and beyond have gone so far as saying poor lighting after a certain time period, in fact, the wrong kind of lighting after a certain time period is carcinogenic, right? It's undeniable that light affects our mood, it affects our health, it affects things like our digestion, energy levels, and most importantly, the quality of our sleep. So if you think about the spectrum of light, just to give you a quick example here, and you compare an 11 a.m. sunshine, okay, a very rich white tone, with a 5 p.m. sort of sunset amber tone. Okay, your eyes are getting a signal depending on color tone, intensity, hue, and angle of the light entering your eye. And you can imagine, now that we've introduced artificial light into our lives, what's happened. For the last 100 years, we've been walking around as if it was almost a constant twilight. We get way too much light artificially at night. I think people have started to understand that if you look at your computer screen or television screen or iPhones or tablets very late at night, and you're getting this rich white blue light at 11 p.m. that's telling your body it's 11 a.m., go outside and have energy, that's not good for you. That's not good for how you're going to sleep that evening. And so there are things we can do indoors with artificial light to regulate that, to mimic the position of the sun in the sky. And it's all about using LED technology to change the intensity, color, angle, hue. Long story short, as we've realized this, we've really said, okay, there's some meat on the bone to this argument here. There's a green building movement, but we believe with all these disciplines put together, we have a chance of introducing a protocol that will inspire a new movement in the built environment that expands on green, does not contradict anything in the energy-saving world, but enhances that and changes this argument not just to environmental sustainability, but to human and biological sustainability. So the culmination of this was about 5 years of research, leveraging work that was done. And in October of 2014, there we go. We introduced a document and put it into the public domain called the Well Building Standard. And this was after lots of work. You could imagine that the prospects of combining the best of science and medicine with the best of architecture and technology, it was a daunting proposition. It's not something that one company can do. And so we opened this process up to a collaboration with many, many folks in the industry, some leading medical organizations, and some thought leaders in sustainability, architecture, engineering, et cetera. I'll speak a little further about our work with Dr. Wood. Barbara's here again today as well at the Mayo Clinic. But we spent a lot of time as an organization at Delos working with the best hospitals we feel in the world, collaborating with the likes of Mayo, the Cleveland Clinic as well, a group of doctors from the sleep school at Harvard, and gathering a lot of that thought and evidence and combining that with industry practitioners to put together a protocol that addressed each one of these disciplines and said, okay, if we're going to prescribe a manner in which we can build that promotes human health, then it's a big proposition and we need help. And that's exactly what we did. We invited the industry to do this. And then after we put this document forth, went through rounds and rounds of peer reviews and had experts in each field, in each discipline, whether it was HVAC or engineering, the air bucket, the water bucket, so on and so forth, tell us what is doable, what is practical, what is not. And after all that vetting, thankfully we're able to introduce a standard to the industry that has since received some pretty substantial global adoption. In fact, much more rapid adoption than green received in its first year and a half of existence. One thing I'd like to say is once we had the intellectual property here, and there was a lot of R&D capital that went into obviously understanding what the implications were of each one of these practices and disciplines, there was a choice that we made as an organization. We could have said, okay, this is intellectual property, let's develop buildings in a healthy manner. And that would have been okay, and I think we would have touched a certain number of individuals. But we recognized at that point that this is a social, mission-driven organization, and that we had a responsibility to put this body of work out into the public domain. This is a document that can be downloaded for free, and it is a document that many people are practicing to this day. And we were proud to change our mantra, not from a sort of let's keep this internal and let's develop a couple of these buildings and see what types of premium we can get for them, but instead put it forth as a certification program and examine the benefits of things like BREEAM and LEED and how much progress they made and how much change they inspired and social good that had been done running them as certification programs. And that's exactly what we did. We examined some of the best organizations in the world that have run certification programs and established a partnership with one of those organizations, GBCI, which is the certifying body for the U.S. Green Building Council that administers LEED. I think at that point we looked at the word certification and the industry and said, interesting, the industry's probably going to look at this and say, oh, geez, another standard, another set of fees, another set of consultants, another set of paperwork, and so on and so forth. And so we wanted to make sure that this was seamlessly integrated into green building practices. In fact, there are some overlaps, and there's ways that you can leverage, but we wanted the experience to be one for the end user so that if somebody was pursuing good green practices, they were already going some of the way there on well. And we didn't want any overlap and more paperwork and additional sets of consultants needed and so on and so forth. So we were very mindful of making this standard fungible with the organizations across the world. We have partnerships with many green building councils across the world and equally are creating equivalencies with standards such as BREEAM, as you understand, and has penetrated in Europe very, very successfully, and we commend that, LEED and others. And so the result of all this, just to give you some metrics on adoption so far, we now have over 250 projects globally going for well certification. Okay, that's across 15 countries and 50 million square feet. This is many different typologies, but when you think of some of the biggest and best organizations in the world, whether they're technology companies, healthcare companies, financial institutions that are doing this to their headquarters because they say, I'd like my employees to be healthier, that means they'll be more productive, that means my insurance costs are gonna go down, or whether the biggest landlords in the world that feel that there's an economic proposition for offering a space that is well certified to tenants in a residential environment, in a corporate environment, et cetera. And so we have thankfully taken a look at the adoption so far globally, and we feel that this is an argument that stands on its own. I'd like to introduce a little bit more because, again, this is something that you can find in the public domain, and we are inviting the industry to join this movement, just as we invited the research community to join the data that informed the development of it. There's one thing left I'd say here about the standard and how well certification is slightly different than traditional building standards. This is a performance-based standard. So at the end of a process, and I'll run you through the categories of the well building standard, but at the end of the process, there's a performance assessment done, measuring parts per billion in air quality and all these pollutants that we say are no good for the body. All right, pollutants, parts per billion in water quality, ambient sound levels, lux levels for lighting. So all of these things can be measured. And what we did not want is to put forth a protocol that could be followed as a checklist and have a building not perform. And so in order to get a seal, a stamp on the building, that means at the end of your process and your build out or renovation, that the tests have been done and the building is actually performed. And there is an ongoing recertification every 3 years. Think of it as if a doctor is putting a stethoscope on the building, saying, is this a healthy building for its occupants? Not just were the right principles followed, but is the building performing? And that's a big pivot that we felt was something the industry was asking for. So I talked about the well and green overlap. I think I'll spend some time here getting into the specifics of the standard. Here's the 7 concepts. Again, a lot of this is intuitive. Purified air, no argument. Purified water, no argument. Okay? Nourishment. There are things you can do in building practice to encourage nourishment. Now remember, not all of this needs to be in the building structure and bones and concrete and metal. This is also an operational guideline of how a facility is run. So when you think of what type of food is offered in the cafeteria, the portion sizes, the manner in which these are presented to folks, accessibility for things like hydration stations and so on and so forth, programming elements here actually support the cost equation, and I'll get that into that in a minute. But this is a operational and facility standard as much as a construction standard, and we believe that completes the picture. Certainly does when you think about the things that can be accomplished in health and well-being on the operational side. Light, we talked a little bit about that before. Fitness, active design, encouraging people to use the stairwells. Many things that I'm sure we're all familiar with that we can do to drive traffic to places in the building that encourage them to exercise passively. Comfort and mind. Okay, so comfort, we're thinking about thermal comfort. We're thinking about things like acoustic levels and so on and so forth. And then mind, I'll get into it in a little bit, is all about awareness. It's a lot about education. And some things that put the human body in touch with its natural elements, like biophilia and its connection with nature. So as we continue with the structure of the standard, there are certainly different levels that you can achieve, okay? So there's base level, gold level, platinum. And it's centered around preconditions. There are certain features out of the 102 features in the standard that have to be met. All right, we feel that for a building to be called healthy at a baseline, there's a precondition. And then a set of optimizations depending on things like budget, depending on things like timeline and design and so on and so forth, that the building can strive to achieve. And depending on how many optimizations the building achieves, that rewards a different level of certification. Silver, gold, and platinum. And here are the categories. So again, air. We're obviously speaking about ventilation. We're obviously speaking about purification. And we're also speaking of things in the operational bucket like cleaning protocols and then equally material selection. Water is not just water quality when you think of human health. It's so important to hydrate. So it's the placement and accessibility of water, hydration stations, for example, and then equally water filtration and quality of water. Nourishment, as we mentioned before, size of portions, access to healthy foods, sanitary food prep areas, so on and so forth. I'll leave that up for a minute so you guys can digest the rest of it. But in the nourishment bucket, obviously, there's a lot of operational and non-structural features. Light, again, daylight is optimal, and where it can't be achievable, we're looking for the right circadian-aligned, circadian-proper lighting scheme indoors that adjust your body's circadian rhythm, more appropriately reflects the position of the sun in the sky, the color temperature, the hue of that sun. We do not want that 11 a.m. bright blue conference room-like light later in the day because it's going to affect your sleeping patterns that evening. And of course, high-quality sleep is the best thing we can do for our bodies. Fitness, I mentioned again, things like active design, things like sit-stand desks, even the furniture comes into play here. It's not just the building structure, it's what's inside. Many people have said that sitting for long periods of time is the new smoking, and so we want to encourage people to stand up. As I see you all sitting, I feel bad. And then comfort again, ergonomics, thermal comfort, acoustics, so on and so forth. Mind, connection to nature, education, even things like altruism. I was challenged before to explain the term altruistic capitalism, and I think that you'll be quite inspired by our approach here, because when we set up the organization to administer the well building standard, of course, GBCI is a third-party certifying body that says pass or fail according to the standard. But we set up a subsidiary company that's a for-benefit company called the International Well Building Institute. I'm going to get into a bit of the philanthropic, mission-driven part of the IWBI, the International Well Building Institute, in a second, but I just want to drive this point home that well is about performance. Okay, this is not a protocol, follow these guidelines. If the building performs, it will be certified. If it's not performing, it will have a chance to rectify, obviously, but we will not, and we have designed this so that you will not see that seal on a building that is actually underperforming. I like the reference here to a nutrition label as your scorecard for well certification. Now, the International Well Building Institute. So this was an organization, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on what Delos does and what the International Well Building Institute does. We set this up as a for-benefit corporation. And it's a mission-driven organization that is going to drive a substantial altruistic give, primarily to the narrative of homelessness, and I'll explain that in a minute. We are donating more than half, 51% of the profits from certification program, to philanthropic causes. And if you pause for a minute and think about the momentum that can be achieved with the well building movement, and if well could do what green could do, and that 51% of those profits will actually go to things like putting a roof over someone's head that doesn't have it. Collectively, ladies and gentlemen, we can put a major dent in the global housing problem. Major dent, if you're talking about billions and billions of square feet. Why homelessness, right? I think when we examine health and well-being, and we examine the prospect of introducing health and wellness into the built environment, the right place to start from an altruistic point of view and from a philanthropic point of view would be to put a roof over somebody's head who doesn't have one. That'd probably be square one. And so this starts to answer that question about altruistic capital and a company that is run like a business that is in fact a for-profit and a hybrid between a for-profit and a non-profit is what a for-benefit corporation is. It's a legal status. And in our charter, just like a line item of an expense would be, there will be a substantial give back to homelessness, and that's the idea, and that hopefully answers some of the questions about altruistic capitalism at the beginning of the session. So as we move on here, I want to say a few things about the research. You can imagine that Delos, as an organization, spent a lot of time developing a protocol for healthy building. But in order to do that, we had to examine what was possible. So it was all about the products, solutions, and technologies needed to build healthy, right, or to achieve well certification. It would be one thing just to write a prescription on how to, but if this was unattainable, if this was extraordinarily expensive, and had no shot of rapid global adoption, then obviously we'd be missing a trick. We have examined the cost of well certification, and thankfully, at the end of the day, when you think about a lot of the choices that are just better health, more health-conscious choices, smarter decisions, especially if it's early on in design, the cost implications of getting a well-certified structure over the line are substantially lower than as you may have had some experience with green in the early days and even some green building now. We have seen some variability, and it's going to take a large installed base to say these numbers with confidence, but we have seen numbers as low as 0.5% to 1% to 2% increase in construction budget to get well certified. If you remember when green building was introduced, I think it was brought to the market at about an incremental 12 to 15%. Okay, so in our early days here, we're having success and clients are getting over the line and saying, wow, in some cases that didn't cost any more. That was just a more health-conscious choice, and that's very exciting about the prospects of continuing to receive some pretty substantial adoption here. But back to the point, we had to examine, a lot of the research, obviously in each pillar and each discipline, and spend a lot of time on products and solutions and technologies, and accordingly, We were very proud to join forces with the Mayo Clinic last year. In fact, it was September 2014, when we announced a collaboration with the Mayo Clinic to build and operate something called the Well Living Lab, right adjacent to Mayo's campus in Rochester, Minnesota. And this is a facility, if you could imagine, that mimics real-life scenarios, modular in design, okay? So we can rearrange these structures and collectively, with Mayo, run tests on all these principles we're talking about on simulated real-life environments. We can mimic an infant's bedroom. We can mimic a hotel room, a corporate office, and have live subjects that are living there and working there and playing there react to us dialing up and down a lot of these principles that we talked about, whether they're related to the well building standard or they're just related to health and wellness in the built environment. And if you think about all this science that says, well, circadian lighting is important and it has this effect on your body, we've extended that and said, let's put individuals in a simulated office environment. Let's dial up and down the lighting. And let's test things like heart rate variability, productivity, stress levels, biomarkers, so on and so forth. Okay, so sensor rich now and looking to emulate real life environments. And I think over time, and thankfully Mayo as pioneers here have seen the value. Dr. Wood alluded to this early on. There is going to be a profound amount of data that we can capture over the next several years. From the installed base of well-certified buildings and gathering data from corporations such as absenteeism, insurance costs, healthcare costs, so on and so forth, doctor visits, productivity, but equally in a laboratory environment where we have full control and we can really dial up these factors, dial them up and down. So we're very excited about that. In fact, 1 year later, which was September 2015, we opened the doors. So after construction of the lab, of the facility, the doors were open this past fall. We're now starting testing in the environment. We're very excited about that, and we have since opened the effort up to the industry. In the same manner that we invited the industry to peer review the well building standard, because we really wanted a robust document, we are inviting the industry, practitioners, folks that have solutions and technologies to bring forth their ideas and come into the lab as alliance members. I mentioned Noeber early on in this conversation, and they are one of the pioneers and have joined the lab as an alliance member. I think they see the value in the research. So thank you for that contribution. I commend you on the efforts there. We have since gathered support and signed up a number of corporations across many different sectors. You're talking about real estate companies, big cap tech companies, financial companies, real estate companies, furniture companies, so on and so forth. The industry is going to play a role in this because it's one thing to do research. It's another thing to translate that research into practices and solutions that the industry can use, and that's the effort here. So we're very excited about that. This is a snapshot from the roof. You can see the different modes, different rooms, different simulated environments inside the lab. Okay, well, I've spent a fair amount of time on the altruistic part, so I will not repeat that. But ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that there's still a lot of work to do. When you think about what we're trying to accomplish here as an industry, we're trying to do this together. Okay, if you think about preventative medicine and doing things, we spend 90% of our time indoors, 90% of our time. If we can make that 90% of our time in a healthier environment and start to think about healthcare from a preventative standpoint, not reactive medicine, I think it's got major implications on healthcare costs. It's got major implications on all of us and our lives. And this is something that we're very excited to be a part of. We invite every one of you to come join us, and we look forward to continue to update you on the progress. So thanks for having us here this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scialla. Maybe one question. You made a very interesting comparison with the sustainability movement. Well, that these ideas about sustainability started around the 1970s with the oil crisis, 45 years ago. And now we're in the middle of, let's say, a transition 45 years later. What would be your biggest, your most important advice to speed up this process? Because we cannot wait 45 years, I guess.
No, excellent. I think we have one thing going for us that we did not have 45 years ago, and that's access to information. Okay, when you think about people's access to health metrics, it's on their watch, it's on their jawbone, it's on their iPhone. When you think about sensory technology that can measure the air quality of a building in Beijing versus that outdoors, this is going to be, in my view, something that rapidly moves towards wellness in the built environment is not a privilege, it's a right. People are going to demand this. And the fact that we have a highly connected society globally, and the information is right in front of us, and you don't have to go to a library to look up health effects. You don't have to go to an economics class to understand what the implications of higher oil are. It's right in front of you. It's on your mobile devices. It's in our faces every day. So I think that has obviously compressed the timeline of just about everything happening. And thankfully for us, that the wind is at our backs. The more we have awareness about this, I think the more people are going to say, well, this should just be the way we build. This is not a type of building. This has to be the way we build. And I think it'll move quite rapidly and even quicker than the green building movement. Yes, started 40 years ago, but I think it was only 1998, 1999 when we started to see these certifications, and thankfully we've touched 20 billion square feet in that time, but I think we could do it a heck of a lot quicker with than 15 years.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.